Olivia was 5 years old when she started screaming while looking at the cold waters of San Francisco Bay. Her family thought it was just a normal childhood fear. The water looked dark. The currents were strong. The sound coming from her mouth wasn't that of a child. The raft broke apart. Frank didn't make it. John didn't make it. But I swam all night and made it. Her mother knelt down and asked her what she meant. She looked at her mother with eyes that seemed much older than 5 and replied, "I was very cold. The water wanted to kill me, but I didn't drown." The date was the 11th of June, 1962. That night, 3 men escaped from Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. Their names were Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin. The FBI declared them dead. The case was closed. But 53 years later, a child standing in the same cove was about to prove them wrong. You will witness the most documented prison escape in American history through the eyes of someone who claims to have lived through it. The family's name was Cooper, David and Sarah Cooper. They lived in Columbus, Ohio, with their only child, Olivia. David worked as an accountant. Sarah taught at a local elementary school. They were ordinary people living an ordinary life. Olivia was the greatest miracle in their lives. Sarah had suffered 3 miscarriages before Olivia was born. Olivia was finally born healthy and crying. They promised to give their only child, Olivia, everything. They promised to give her a good education and a loving home. They wanted to protect her from all the evil in the world. Olivia was like other children during the first 6 years of her life. She spent her time playing ordinary games. Sometimes she had nightmares. But what child doesn't have bad dreams? Sarah never asked her what her nightmares were about. She thought they were about monsters. Perhaps she was experiencing the ordinary fears that live in children's imaginations. However, everything changed during their trip to San Francisco in the summer of 2015. They had saved money for 2 years to take this vacation. Sarah had always wanted to see the Golden Gate Bridge. David wanted to visit Alcatraz. When he was young, he had read the story of the 3 men who escaped from the prison in 1962. He had been fascinated by the story ever since. The 3 men had disappeared into the night. The FBI searched for weeks. They found a paddle, a life jacket, and pieces of a raft. But there were no bodies. The official conclusion was that Frank Morris and John and Clarence Anglin had drowned in the icy waters of San Francisco Bay. The case was closed in 1979 because no further information about it could be found. David thought it would be educational for Olivia to see the prison. He thought she needed to learn about history. They booked a ferry tour for the 14th of June. The morning was sunny and clear. Olivia was quiet during breakfast. Sarah asked her if she was okay. She shook her head. She didn't eat. When they arrived at Pier 33, the child stopped walking. David turned around. He saw his son standing motionless, staring at the water. "Olivia," he called. "Come on, son, we're going to miss the ferry." Olivia didn't move. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. Sarah walked over to him and knelt down. "Sweetie, what is wrong?" she asked gently. The child looked at her with large, frightened eyes. "I can't go in the water," she whispered. "Why?" asked Sarah. "Because I almost died in that water." David and Sarah looked at her in shock. "What are you talking about?" asked David. He was trying to stay calm. Olivia pointed to the dark water. In an emotionless tone, she said, "The raft broke apart." It was as if she were reading from a script from a scenario only she could see. "Frank didn't make it. John didn't make it. But I swam. I swam all night." Sarah felt cramps in her stomach. "Who is Frank? We don't understand." The child blinked. "Frank Morris. He was the smartest one among us. He planned everything. He made a raft out of raincoats. He said the ventilation holes would carry us north to Angel Island with the current. But the raft broke apart. The water was very cold. First Frank drowned, then John. I kept swimming. I thought I was going to die, but I didn't." David's mouth was dry. He crouched down next to his son. "Olivia, where do you know these names from?" The child looked at him as if the answer were obvious. "Because I was there. My name was Clarence. Clarence Anglin." Sarah's hands were shaking. She had heard about the escape from Alcatraz everyone had, but they had never spoken to Olivia. She was only 7. She didn't watch documentaries. She didn't read history books. "Olivia, baby, where did you hear this story?" she asked. The child shook her head. It is not a story. Everything I am telling you is true. We left when the lights went out on the 11th of June, 1962, at 10:30. We went through the ventilation holes behind the sinks. We climbed onto the roof. We lowered the raft and oars into the water. The guards didn't notice us until morning. Olivia paused for a moment. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. I reached the island. I was so exhausted I couldn't move. I buried the money and the letter next to the tree. I was going to come back for them. But I never did. David felt a sharp cramp in his neck. What letter? He asked. Olivia wiped her eyes. I am talking about the letter I wrote to my mother. I wanted her to know I was alive. I put it in a glass bottle with the money. There was $153 in the glass bottle. That was all we had. I wrapped it in plastic and buried it under the madrone tree on the north side of Angel Island. I was going to come back, but I never did. Sarah's heart was pounding. Olivia, how do you know all this? Olivia looked at her with an expression that shouldn't be on a child's face. It was the look of someone who had been keeping a secret for a very long time. Because I remember everything, she said. But that was only the beginning. David Copper didn't believe in reincarnation. He didn't believe in ghosts. He didn't believe in anything he couldn't see, measure, or prove. So when his 5-year-old son started talking about the 1962 escape from Alcatraz, his first instinct was to find a logical explanation. Maybe Olivia had heard something on television. Maybe she saw a movie poster at the hotel. Maybe another kid at school told her a story. Children have vivid imaginations. They mix their fantasies with reality. This should just be a passing phase. Do you believe in reincarnation? But Sarah wasn't so sure. That night in the hotel room, Olivia had finally fallen asleep. She sat down at the edge of the bed and opened her laptop. She typed Clarence Anglin into the search bar. Pages of results came up. FBI files, newspaper articles, documentaries. The story matched Olivia's account perfectly. 3 men had built a small raft out of raincoats on the 11th of June, 1962. They left the prison with mannequin heads left in their beds. The escape was real, the men were real. And according to all official reports, they had drowned. Sarah examined the photos of the 3 escaped men one by one. Frank Morris, John Anglin, Clarence Anglin. She stared at Clarence's mugshot for a long time. Dark hair, strong jawline. He had a face that showed no fear. She looked at Olivia, sleeping peacefully in the bed next to her. Her gentle, sensitive son, who cried when he saw dead birds on the sidewalk, was now talking about strange things. How could he know these things? She closed her laptop. She lay down next to David. We need to talk to an expert, she whispered. David took a deep breath. Who? A psychologist. Sarah shook her head. We need to talk to someone who knows about this case. Someone who can tell us if what Olivia said is possible. 3 days later, they were sitting in the office of Dr. Raymond Holt, a criminal psychologist and historian who had spent 30 years studying the Alcatraz escape. His office was in Berkeley. The cabinets were filled with old photographs and files. Dr. Holt was in his 70s. He had white hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. David had called ahead and explained the situation. Dr. Holt had agreed to meet with them. However, the tone he used on the phone suggested he thought he was dealing with delusional parents. They set off for Dr. Holt's office. Olivia sat in a chair that seemed too big for her, swinging her legs. Dr. Holt leaned back in his chair. He folded his hands in his lap. Olivia, he began. He spoke in a gentle but skeptical tone. Your family says you remember being Clarence Anglin, is that true? Olivia nodded. Can you describe what Clarence looked like? Dr. Holt asked. Olivia thought for a moment. He had dark hair. He had brown eyes. He had a scar on his left hand from a fight in Atlanta. Dr. Holt raised his eyebrows. He pulled a file from his desk. He flipped through a few pages. He stopped at one page. He began to read silently. Clarence Anglin had indeed been incarcerated at Atlanta Penitentiary before being transferred to Alcatraz. According to medical records, he had a scar on his left hand. Dr. Holt cleared his throat. This information is already in the public records, he said. Let's try something else. Can you tell me which cell Clarence was in? Olivia didn't hesitate. Cell B, -1, -5, -0? The cell next to John's Frank was in cell B, -1, -3, -8. Dr. Holt's face remained expressionless, but Sarah saw his jaw tighten. He wrote something down. "What did you eat for breakfast on the morning of the escape?" Olivia frowned. "We ate oatmeal. We always ate oatmeal. It tasted like paper." Dr. Holt put down his pen. "Can you tell me about the raft?" Olivia's voice grew even quieter. "We made it out of raincoats. We stole them from the factory. We glued them together with adhesive. We worked on it for months. We tested it in the shower. It floated. Frank said it would hold 3 people if we were careful, but it didn't." Dr. Holt leaned forward. "Why didn't it hold?" "Because the water was too choppy. The current pulled us apart. The seams ripped. Frank tried to hold it together, but the waves were too strong. I heard him call my name. Then I didn't hear him anymore. John was next to me. He said he couldn't feel his legs, then he sank. I kept swimming. I wanted to stop. I wanted to let the water take me, but a voice inside me told me to keep going. So I did." The room was silent. Dr. Holt looked at the child for a long time. Finally, he turned to David and Sarah and replied, "Can I talk to you outside?" They went out into the hallway. Dr. Holt closed the door. He lowered his voice. "I've been studying this case for 30 years, he said. "I've interviewed the former guards. I've read all the FBI files. I've walked through that prison hundreds of times. Some of the details your son just gave me aren't in any public records. He got the cell numbers right, he got the breakfast menu right, but the detail about the stitches tearing, that is a theory I've had for years based on the condition of the raft pieces that washed ashore. I never published it. I never made it public. There is no way your son could know this." Sarah felt her knees buckle. "What are you saying?" Dr. Holt shook his head slowly. "Either your son accessed classified FBI documents that even I haven't seen." Dr. Holt looked at the closed door, or he is telling the truth. 2 days later, they rented a boat. Dr. Holt had given them the coordinates. They were going to the north side of Angel Island. If Olivia had really buried something there, this was the only way to find out for sure. The morning was gray and cold. Fog rolled in thick waves across the water. Olivia stood at the bow of the boat, staring at the water. She hadn't spoken since they left the harbor. Sarah approached her and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "Are you okay?" she asked. Olivia nodded, but she didn't look at her. "I thought I'd never come back here," she said. The boat moved slowly through the dark waters. Alcatraz looked like a tombstone in the distance. Angel Island, covered in dense green forest, appeared ahead of them. The captain dropped anchor near a small beach on the north side. They waded through the shallow water to the shore. Olivia stood still and looked around. "We'll go this way," she said. Then she started walking. Following her, they climbed up a narrow path winding through thick trees. The air smelled of salt and wet earth. Olivia walked strangely, as if she had walked this path thousands of times before. 15 minutes later, she stopped in front of a large madrone tree. Its red bark was peeling in thin strips. Its branches were broad and old. "Here," she said. "I buried it here." David looked down. There was nothing there, no mark, no disturbance in the soil. Just soil, roots, and 53 years of growth. He had brought a small shovel, thinking this moment might come. But now that they were here, he felt ridiculous. They were about to dig up the ground based on the words of a 5-year-old. Sarah must have seen the doubt on his face, because she put her hand on his arm. "We've come this far," she said. David knelt down. He plunged the shovel into the soil. The soil was soft from the recent rain. He dug carefully. Each time he slowly removed the soil. Olivia stood watching, her face expressionless. Dr. Holt had insisted on coming with them. He stood a few meters away, arms crossed. The expression on his face was unreadable. Minutes passed. The hole was getting deeper. David's hands were covered in mud. Just as he was about to suggest trying another spot, the shovel hit something hard. The sound was very clear. Metal had struck glass. David's heart stopped. He looked at Sarah. Her eyes were wide with shock. He put the shovel aside. He cleared the dirt away with his hands. His fingers touched something smooth and cold. He pulled it out of the dirt. It was a glass bottle. An old-fashioned, curved Coca-Cola bottle. It was covered in dirt and moss. but it was intact. Inside, wrapped in something like decayed plastic, was a dark, folded object. Dr. Holt approached the area they had dug. His face looked pale. "Let me take a look," he said. His voice was trembling. David handed him the bottle. Dr. Holt held the bottle up to the light. His hands were shaking. "We have to open this carefully," he said. "If there is organic matter inside, exposure to air could destroy it." He took a knife from his jacket. He carefully tried to open the rusty cap. It took a few minutes. When the cap finally opened, a rotten, stale water smell wafted out. Dr. Holt tilted the bottle. He poured the contents into his hand. The plastic packaging shattered the moment he touched it. Inside was a pile of paper, wet, stained, torn, but it was definitely money, old banknotes. He carefully spread them out on a flat rock. There were $1 and $5 bills. Some were so damaged that the numbers were hard to make out, but the year was still legible on 3 of them. They were dated 1960, 1961, and 1962. Dr. Holt's hands were shaking. He wondered how much money it was. He counted the bills. There were 23 banknotes that were intact enough to be identifiable. The rest had turned to pulp. But there was something else under the money. There was a piece of paper that had been folded many times. Dr. Holt lifted it carefully, as if holding an ancient sacred book. He unfolded it slowly. The ink had run. Most of the words were illegible, but at the top, 4 words written in stained handwriting were still clearly legible. "Dear Mother, I am alive." Dr. Holt sat down hard on the floor. He stared at the letter as if it were a ghost. "It is real," he whispered. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. David couldn't speak. Olivia went over to him. She looked at the bottle, the money, and the letter. "I told you, I buried it here. I was going to come back and get it, but I couldn't. They were looking for me everywhere." Dr. Holt looked at the child with an expression partly of horror, partly of astonishment. "What happened after you reached the island?" he asked. Olivia sat down next to him on the ground. "I hid among the trees for 2 days. I was so cold I was shivering constantly. I saw helicopters. I saw boats. They were looking for us everywhere. I knew that if they found me, they would send me back to Alcatraz or worse. So I waited until nightfall. I swam back toward the mainland. I tried to swim all night long. When I reached the shore, I passed out. A man found me. He didn't ask any questions. He gave me dry clothes and $20. He told me to disappear, so I did." "Where did you go?" Dr. Holt asked. Olivia looked into the distance. "I went south. I worked on farms. I worked constantly on construction sites under fake names. I never stayed anywhere for more than a few months. I was always afraid someone would recognize me. I wanted to contact my family. I wanted to tell my mother I was alive, but I couldn't. It would have put them in danger. So I lived alone. I died alone." "When did you die?" "I died of pneumonia on the 3rd of January, 2009, in a hospital in Bakersfield. I was 78 years old. I had no ID. They buried me in an unmarked grave." "What?" Olivia said, stunned everyone. Her mother couldn't make sense of it. Did her son really experience reincarnation? Tears streamed down Sarah's face. David looked at his son as if he had never seen him before. Dr. Holt carefully gathered the money and the letter. He put everything back in the bottle. His hands were still shaking. "This changes everything. This proves that at least one of them survived. The FBI closed the case, assuming all 3 drowned. But if Clarence reached the shore, he lived another 47 years. He looked at Olivia. "Do you know what happened to Frank and John?" Olivia shook her head. "I never saw them again. I think they drowned, like everyone said. But I didn't drown. I survived, and I am sorry I never told anyone. I am sorry. My mother died thinking I was dead." Dr. Holt slowly stood up. He looked at David and Sarah. "I need to contact the FBI. I want these items analyzed. The handwriting, the fingerprints on the bottle, the serial numbers on the banknotes. If these are real, this case will be reopened." He turned to Olivia. "Today you gave your mother a gift. She never knew you survived. She thought you were dead. But you proved you fought to live. You fought to come back. That's not insignificant." Olivia nodded. She smiled for the first time since they had arrived in San Francisco. It was a small, sad smile, but she was truly smiling. "Thank you," she said quietly. Dr. Holt knelt before her. "I am the one who should thank you. You solved the greatest mystery in American criminal history. The FBI took the bottle. They took the money. They took the letter. Dr. Raymond Holt formally requested the reopening of the Alcatraz case, citing new evidence obtained from Angel Island. The FBI sent forensic teams to the scene. They dug around the madrone tree. They found pieces of fabric buried nearby. There were remnants of a raincoat. These pieces matched the material used in the construction of the raft in 1962. The serial numbers on the dollar bills were verified. All were bills produced in the early 1960s. The handwriting on the letter was analyzed. It was compared to known writing samples from Clarence Anglin's prison records. The result was inconclusive, but not impossible. The paper was too badly deteriorated for a definitive match. However, there was one detail that no one could explain. On the corner of one of the $5 bills, there was a fingerprint that was barely visible with a magnifying glass. It was an incomplete print. There was a smudge, and it was missing. The FBI searched its database. It matched Clarence Anglin's left thumb. The print had been on file since his arrest in 1956. There was no doubt. Clarence Anglin had touched that money, and if he buried it on Angel Island after escaping prison, he had survived. The case was officially reopened in October 2015. The FBI released a statement acknowledging that new evidence suggested at least one smuggler may have reached shore. They didn't mention Olivia Cooper. They didn't mention reincarnation. They said the discovery was prompted by an anonymous tip. Dr. Holt respected the family's wishes and kept their identities confidential. Months later, he published an article titled Angel Island Evidence, a re-examination of the 1962 Alcatraz Escape. This article became the most cited work on the case for decades. As for Olivia, her memories began to fade. By the time she was 8, she no longer spoke of Clarence Anglin. She no longer refused to go near the water. She became a normal child again. She played soccer. She collected comic books. She made friends at school. Her family never brought up the subject unless she did. She rarely brought it up either. But sometimes on quiet nights, Sarah would find her sitting by the window, staring into space. She would ask her what she was thinking. She would say she didn't know, but her eyes looked bigger than her tears. When Olivia turned 16, a reporter from the San Francisco Chronicle found the family. Someone had leaked the story. The reporter wanted to do an interview. David refused, but Olivia said she would do it. She sat down across from the reporter in the living room. She answered every question calmly and clearly. When the reporter asked her if she still believed she was Clarence Anglin, Olivia paused for a long time. Then she said something that would become the last sentence of the article. I don't know if I am Clarence Anglin. I don't know how memory works. I don't know if spirits return or if the universe plays tricks on us. But I know what I saw, I know what I felt, and I know this very well somewhere. A man who spent his entire life running finally found peace. The article went viral. Millions of people read it. Some believed it. Some called it a hoax. Others saw it as proof of reincarnation. The debate raged online for months, but for the Cooper family, what strangers thought didn't matter. They had lived it. They had uncovered the truth with their own hands. And whether it was a memory, a miracle, or a coincidence, it had changed them forever. Olivia is now 20 years old. She is studying history at Ohio State University. She wants to be a teacher. She still doesn't like the ocean. She still sometimes has dreams about cold water, darkness, and a voice calling her name. But she has learned to live with it. She has learned that some questions have no answers. And that is okay with her. Because what matters isn't understanding how it happened. What matters is that the story of a man who died alone and nameless was finally returned. Clarence Anglin's family was investigated after the discovery. His brother Robert was still alive. He was 83 years old. He cried when the FBI told him the evidence. He said he had always believed his brothers had succeeded. He said he always believed they were living a quiet life somewhere else, under different names, and maybe they were. Maybe Frank and John had survived too. Maybe they were buried in nameless graves in distant towns, their real names forgotten. Or maybe, as the FBI always said, they had drowned that June night. We'll never know for sure, but Clarence had succeeded, and for 47 years he carried the burden of survival alone. Do you believe Olivia Cooper truly carries Clarence Anglin's memories? Or do you think this whole story is just an impossible coincidence? But before you decide, Ask yourself this: how could a 5-year-old child from Ohio find a bottle buried 53 years ago on an island he had never visited? How could he know details not found in public records? How does his story align with evidence even the FBI couldn't explain? Perhaps there are things in this world beyond the reach of logic. Perhaps memory is stronger than death. Perhaps the men who escaped from Alcatraz that night didn't just vanish into the sea. Perhaps one of them returned to tell us the truth. Subscribe and join us as we uncover the next mystery buried in the past, waiting for a voice brave enough to tell its story.